fierce diplomatic standoff has erupted between U.S. President Donald Trump and senior Russian officials, igniting global concern and dominating headlines. What began as a pointed social media message from Trump to Russian President Vladimir Putin has escalated into a war of words, underscoring rising tensions, not just on the front lines in Ukraine, but also in the online sphere, where global leaders are now exchanging warnings, accusations, and veiled threats in public view. It all started with a post by President Trump on Truth Social. He directly addressed Russian President Vladimir Putin, warning that the Russian leader is playing with fire by refusing to come to the table for ceasefire talks with Ukraine. Trump also claimed that really bad things would have already happened in Russia if it weren't for him, a statement that didn't sit well in Moscow. Now, in response, one of Russia's most powerful figures, Dmitry Medvedev, the former president and current deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, hit back hard. In a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, Medvedev mocked Trump's comments and issued a chilling reminder. He said, "I only know of one really bad thing. What tea?" And then he added, "I hope Trump understands this." That kind of rhetoric, casually throwing out the idea of World War III, is exactly the kind of escalation that's making global leaders very nervous. The U.S. envoy to Moscow, Keith Kellogg, responded immediately, calling Medvedev's words reckless and unfitting of a world power. This isn't the first time Medvedev has used this kind of language. Throughout the Russia-Ukraine war, he's issued repeated warnings that Russia could use nuclear weapons if provoked. Putin himself has also raised that possibility in past speeches, especially in his State of the Nation address in 2024, where he warned the West about the risks of supporting Ukraine with troops or direct intervention. Putin said at the time, "Everything the West comes up with creates the real threat of a conflict with the use of nuclear weapons, and thus the destruction of civilization." But what's unusual now is that this time, the warning wasn't aimed at NATO or the European Union. It was aimed at Trump, someone who has had a very complicated, often warm relationship with Putin over the years. Let's back up for a second and look at what led to this public clash. Over the weekend, Trump issued several harsh condemnations of the Kremlin, especially after a series of brutal Russian airstrikes rocked cities across Ukraine. At least 12 people, including children, were killed in what Ukrainian officials are calling the largest aerial assault of the war. More than 360 drones and missiles were fired in one night alone. Trump told reporters at an airport in New Jersey, "I don't know what's wrong with him. What the hell happened to him? He's killing a lot of people. I'm not happy about that." Strong words, and they mark a big shift from Trump's usual tone when talking about Russia. He even went as far as to say on Truth Social, "I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, but something has happened to him. He's gone absolutely crazy." Now let's talk about what's happening on the ground in Ukraine, because this war is clearly escalating. On Tuesday, Russian forces reportedly captured 4 villages in Ukraine's northeastern Sumy region. These areas, Novenka, Vasilivka, and Zhuravka, were evacuated earlier, but they mark deeper Russian advances into Ukrainian territory. The Russian Ministry of Defense also claimed to have taken Bilovody, another village nearby. This is part of what Ukrainian officials say is a bigger Russian push into Sumy, a strategic region located just 30 kilometers from the Russian border. The Ukrainian Air Force said Russia's latest barrage targeted 5 locations, including the Khmelnytsky region, which is home to a military air base. 7 cruise missiles and dozens of drones struck residential areas and industrial zones. One strike injured a 14-year-old boy in Odessa, Russia. Meanwhile, claims it only struck military targets and that the attacks were a response to Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian soil, including some that temporarily shut down airports in Moscow. President Zelensky addressed the situation in his nightly video message. Though he didn't directly mention Trump, he said the attack showed that Putin had chosen to prolong the war, not end it, and that the Kremlin is playing with diplomacy. Zelensky said, "There is no military sense in this, but it is an obvious political choice, a choice to continue the war and destroy lives. He added that Russia deserves full-scale pressure and that the international community should do everything it can to limit Moscow's military capabilities. Meanwhile, back in Washington, President Trump says he's now considering a fresh round of sanctions against Russia, though so far he hasn't acted. Some European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, have expressed hope that Trump's recent harsh tone could finally lead to tougher U.S. measures. But many European officials remain frustrated. They've been trying to convince Trump to take stronger steps for months, and while his language has changed, his actions haven't yet. Let's not forget, this war has dragged on for over 3 years. Thousands have died, millions have been displaced, and even as world leaders argue online, the fighting on the ground is intensifying. Swarms of drones are being used by both sides, and every week seems to bring new escalations. So what does this latest flare-up mean? Well, for one, it shows that Trump's relationship with Putin may be shifting from one of mutual respect to open hostility. Second, it's a reminder that tensions between nuclear powers remain dangerously high. And third, it signals that the conflict in Ukraine isn't winding down. It's entering a new, even more volatile phase. So where does it go from here? Will Trump actually impose new sanctions? Will Russia respond even more aggressively? And is Medvedev's mention of World War III just bluster or a sign of real danger?